PNC is proud to support the presentation of this City Club of Cleveland Friday Forum on WVIZ PBS.
Additional support comes from Cleveland State University and the Lubrizol Foundation. Support for closed caption transcripts of City Club forums is provided by the Nordson Corporation Foundation.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Jan Roller, and I am president of the club. Here at the City Club, for over 98 years, we have provided a forum for the discussion of important issues of the day. While the current topic grabbing the headlines is the disastrous Gulf oil leak, the ongoing problem plaguing Americans is the state of our economy and the need for good-paying jobs. Our speaker today, Richard Trumka, president of the AFL-CIO, gets up every morning to combat the crippling joblessness that has moved throughout our country. In his speech at the Harvard Kennedy School in April, he spoke about Americans trying to hold on to a good job in a grim game of musical chairs, where every time the music stops, there are fewer good jobs and more people trying to get and keep one. Mr. Trumka is not unaccustomed to battle. He grew up the son of a coal miner in western Pennsylvania and went to work in the mines himself before he received his bachelor's degree from Pennsylvania State University and then a law degree from Villanova in 1974. He became president of the United Mine Workers in 1982 and led a successful 9-month strike against the Pittsburgh Coal Company, during which 4,000 workers were arrested in 1989. He also established an office that raised U.S. mine worker solidarity with the miners of South Africa while they were fighting apartheid. He was sworn in as president of the AFL-CIO in September last year after serving as its secretary-treasurer for 14 years. The AFL-CIO is the nation's largest labor organization, which has been criticized for being male, pale, and stale. When he became president, Mr. Trumka pledged to change labor's image and woo a younger generation. In 2008, at a union convention, he made a bold speech blasting racism, saying it would be wrong and stupid to vote against Barack Obama because of his race. And today, 2 of AFL-CIO's top 3 officials are women. Mr. Trumka believes the time is ripe for unions to increase their numbers because Americans are more willing now to see their growth as the best way to curb what he sees as excessive, unchecked corporate power. This view makes his appearance here especially timely. The role of corporate America is being subjected to scrutiny. The shockwaves of the 2008 debacle on Wall Street are still being felt. The crisis in the Gulf of Mexico has cast one major corporation with deep Cleveland roots in an especially harsh light. Yet even the oil spill has not generated a unanimous view of corporate behavior. Indeed, one member of Congress just yesterday apologized to BP for what he called a White House shakedown to create a fund to pay for damages from the spill. Through all of this turmoil, can organized labor find a way to increase its membership and its role in American life? Here to give us his answer to that question is labor's leader. Please welcome Richard Trumka.
Given that comment, I wish I had that statue of a congressman to throw into the Potomac as well. Thank you, President Roller, for that very kind introduction, and good afternoon. And I tell you, I'm delighted to be here with you in the great city of Cleveland. And I want to talk to you about the grave economic challenges that we face today and the labor movement's vision of where we need to go from this point forward. And there's no better place to have a discussion about our economic challenges than Cleveland, where business and labor built the American middle class. Cleveland embodies both the consequences of our failed economic policies of the past 3 decades and our hope for a different future. See, the economic crisis has hit hard here. 116,000 jobs lost in the last decade in Cuyahoga County alone. 86,000 home foreclosures last year alone. A self-defeating attempt to address budget shortfalls by attacking school budgets and attacking teachers. But we also see a glimpse of a better future in the Lake Erie wind turbine project, with turbines built right here in Ohio, and in the One Community fiber optics project, and the Cleveland's role as a global center of fuel cell development. So today, as we stand here and join each other, we're really at a turning point. The economic course our nation started in 1980, the effort to have a low-wage, high-consumption society that imports more and more and more of what it consumes, has finally hit the wall. We can't afford to stay the course at this point of letting the private sector and the financial markets run amok, of outsourcing everything that's not nailed to the floor, and of pushing down workers every chance that we get. At last night's vote by Republicans in the U.S. Senate to block a simple extension of unemployment benefits for the most hard-pressed people without jobs is just the latest shame in this country. At some point, there'll be nobody left to buy the junk that we import from everywhere but here. So we now face a future of prolonged high unemployment, of stagnant or falling wages, unless we do something different. Today I'm going to talk about doing something different. We need a national economic strategy for a global economy. And at the heart of that strategy must be a workforce with world-class skills and world-class rights, and trade policies that serve the interests of the American people and our country. But I also want to talk to you about what may seem like a strange subject. That's immigration. Because it's patently clear that we cannot talk about our national workforce strategy unless we face head-on our own contradictions, our own hypocrisy, and our history on immigration. See, the truth is that in a dynamic global economy of the 21st century, we simply cannot afford to have millions of hardworking people without legal protections, without meaningful access to higher education, shut off from the high-wage, high-productivity economy. In short, it's just too costly to waste all that talent, all that strength, and all that drive. But immigration reform is not just an economic issue. So you see, the way we as a nation treat the immigrants among us is more than the economic strategy. It's also about who we are as a nation. See, I grew up in a small town in southwestern Pennsylvania, not very far from here. The immigrant path led from the coal mines and the steel mills of Pittsburgh to the factories in Cleveland and the auto plants in Detroit. And if you look around Cleveland at the ethnic clubs and at the churches, you see a city that immigrants built. Hungarians and Poles, Irish and Italians, Serbs and Croats, and Jews, as well as African Americans. Cleveland is a city where the traditions of the places we came from are the very foundation of our community. It's not easy when my family came to this country. It wasn't easy at all. My parents, grandparents fled poverty and war from different parts of Europe. When I was a kid, there was an ugly name for every one of us. We spoke 12 languages in Nemacolin, Pennsylvania, and they called us Wop and Hunky and Pollock and Kike. We were the last hired and we were the first fired. The people who did the hardest and the most dangerous work. The people who got shorted because we didn't know the language and were afraid to complain. We got into the mines and the mills, and the people already there said that we were taking their jobs. We were ruining their country. Yet in the end, the immigrants of my parents' and grandparents' generation prevailed, and they built America. and then they went on to fight the wars that defended America. See, that's a history of my family. And this is a story of Cleveland and Pittsburgh and Detroit and Chicago and Baltimore and thousands of other cities and towns all across America. And yet today I hear from working people who should know better, including a few in my own family, I might add, that those immigrants are taking our jobs. They're ruining our country. Haven't we been there before? Haven't we seen that very thing before? When I hear that kind of talk, I want to say, did an immigrant move your plant overseas? Did an immigrant take away your pension? Or did an immigrant cut your health care? Did an immigrant destroy American workers' right to organize or to crash the financial system? Did immigrant workers write the trade laws that have done so much to harm us in Ohio? You see, my friends, we are, most of us, the children of immigrants. There was no labor movement in America until workers learned to look at each other and to see not immigrants and native-born, not white and black, not different last names, but our common fate as workers and Americans. See, the labor movement believes that our goal as a nation should be to foster, be a future of shared prosperity, not stubborn unemployment and a lost generation. Thus, that our economic strategy must bring us together instead of driving us apart. Our strategy must help us be the kind of country that we want our children to thrive in. The history that our country can tell us of what we can be. See, we want this country to be the home of the American dream. So what exactly is the American dream? Well, some would tell you that the American dream is the idea that in America, anyone can become rich. And the fact is that the upper reaches of our society are relatively open. It's a good thing about our country. But that's not the American dream. The American dream is not that a few of us will get to be rich, but that all of us will have a fair portion of the good things in life. Time to be with our families, the chance for our children to get an education, and the opportunity to make their own way in the world. Laws that protect us, not oppress us. The American labor movement is all about the pursuit and the defense of this idea of America. And we've learned through our history that's only when working people stand together in the workplace and at the polling place that the American dream is secure. Recently, the American dream brought a man my age named Alvino and his son Ramon to America from Mexico. They were experienced bricklayers, and they were hired to work on a large mixed-use housing development project. It was a public project. They and 30 others worked for 5 weeks, and the contractor never paid them. For too many immigrants seeking the American dream, that is the American reality. Hard work rewarded with rip-offs, and then no way to seek justice. That's why I'm so proud to be able to say that Alvino and Ramon and their co-workers are taking this injustice to the U.S. Department of Labor thanks to the efforts of Bricklayers Union Local 18 in Cincinnati and the Interfaith Workers' Rights Center, whose members understand truly that an injury to one is really an injury to all of us. You see, immigration to the United States is part of a larger picture. It's the picture of how we're getting it wrong about globalization. And there's no better way to understand that than to look at what's happening between the United States and Mexico since NAFTA was implemented in 1994. Now, I know your previous speaker told you about the wonders of trade and NAFTA. Well, NAFTA was sold to the American public on the idea that increasing trade with Mexico would create good jobs in both countries, and it would slow the flow of undocumented workers coming to the U.S. from Mexico. Instead, inequality has grown, and workers' rights have eroded both in the U.S. and Mexico since NAFTA's passage. And illegal immigration flows have tripled since its passage. Today, we treat our relationship with Mexico as if it were a national security problem, solvable with military aid and a militarized border. And I have to tell you, I truly believe that's a dangerous mistake. See, the failures of our relationship with Mexico represent a failed economic strategy, and they can't be solved with guns and soldiers and fences. They must be addressed through an economic strategy for shared prosperity based on rising wages in both countries. Instead, at the heart of the failure of our immigration policy is a very, very unpleasant fact, one that you almost never hear talked about openly. The fact is that too many U.S. employers actually like the current system and the current state of the immigration system. A system where immigrants are both plentiful and undocumented, afraid and available. Too many employers like a system where our borders are closed and opened at the same time. Closed enough to turn immigrants into second-class citizens, and open enough to ensure an endless supply of socially and legally powerless cheap labor. Our immigration system makes a mockery of the American dream. The people doing the hardest work for the least money have no legal protection, no ability to send their children to college, no real right to form a union, no economic or legal security. They have no way to turn their contribution, their years of hard work, into the most fundamental right of all, and that's the right to vote. See, that's intolerable for a democracy, particularly one that seeks to lead the world. Recently, I met a young woman named Fabiola. She came to the United States when she was 2 years old. She went to grade school here. She went to high school here. She went to middle school here. Her parents have worked in the United States for 22 years. 15 years ago, her father became a U.S. citizen. So all of her younger siblings who were born here are also citizens. But Fabiola fell through the legal cracks and is now too old to become a citizen under current migration and immigration law. But that hasn't stopped her from working hard to live the American dream. See, recently she graduated from the University of California with a degree in international development. But she can't find a job in her field because she's undocumented, and all of her talent going unused. So how does Fabiola's story make any sense in economic or human terms? Our talent and our education are being squandered because our immigration system is simply not working. That's why the AFL-CIO is fighting to fix this broken immigration system as a crucial element of our broader economic strategy. Because we stand for the American dream for all who work in our country. Because we are for ending the two-tiered workforce and a two-tiered society. And because an underclass of permanently disenfranchised workers ends up hurting all workers as well. But let me be clear. We're not for just any kind of immigration reform. We'll not support the return of outdated guest worker programs that give immigrants no security, no future here in the United States, no rights, and no hope of being part of the American dream. Immigration reform must begin with the principle that workers in the United States deserve to enjoy a fair share of the wealth that we create, that wages should move up with productivity. See, the labor movement and a broad coalition of faith-based and immigrants' rights groups have worked with former Secretary of Labor Ray Marshall to put together such a program for comprehensive immigration reform. The AFL-CIO is for a fair path toward legalization for all undocumented workers who are working to realize the American dream. We're for the DREAM Act that gives young people like Fabiola a future in the only country that they know. And we need an independent commission to determine our society's genuine need for more immigrants, not based on conjecture or folly or a way to increase profits, but a real need. And then we need to build a pathway that allows immigrants to be securely part of our country from day one, to assert their legal rights, including the right to organize without fear of retaliation. And together with this commission, going forward, we are for establishing real penalties for employers who break the law. See, we must focus enforcement not on those who come here seeking the American dream, but on those who would exploit them. See, this is the reform that the labor movement is fighting for. This is the reform that I am fighting for. But instead, we see today a dangerous drift toward a politics of hate, of scapegoating, of finger-pointing. Last month, I went to Arizona to stand with working people who were the target of a hate campaign. A campaign for racial profiling waged by the state legislature and signed into law by the governor. A campaign to make anyone who might look like an immigrant live in fear of the police. Now, quite frankly, all of us should fear such a system, because in the end, don't all of us who aren't Native Americans look like immigrants and children of immigrants that we are? As president of the AFL-CIO, my message to working people is that we are all bound together by our lives as workers, our dreams for our families, and our hopes for this country's future. The labor movement stands for giving all workers in America the right to dream and achieve the American dream. Unfortunately, as we speak, the American dream is slipping away from all of us. As we point the finger at one another, as we scapegoat one another, instead of at the policies that are truly destroying the American dream gets dimmer with each passing day. Today, as in any economic crisis, there are people who offer hatred and divisiveness as the solution to the crisis. And if our political leaders do not lead, if they do not offer help in the present and clear strategy of prosperity for the future, starting with good jobs, the voices of hate will grow, and they will become more powerful, and they will feed on the public's anger and on its pain and on its desperation. Now, President Obama has laid out in broad terms the approach that we need to take. He's spoken out for creating good jobs, for rebuilding manufacturing, for taking on the challenge of climate change and energy independence and growing exports and investing in our infrastructure, including our education infrastructure. If we're truly going to build a world-class workforce, then we need to restore workers' fundamental right to organize and bargain with their employers so that the wealth we produce as a nation is more fairly and more fundamentally shared. And we need to make sure that every worker in America, documented or undocumented, is protected by our nation's labor laws. That's why it's so urgent that we reform our immigration system. You see, the President's strategy also requires that we invest in rebuilding our country. Consider this fact. As a result of the President's Economic Recovery Act, we're now in the process of planning approximately 500 miles of high-speed rail, including lines right here in Ohio. Sounds good. Until you realize that China, a country about the same size as the United States, is in the process of constructing 5,000 miles of high-speed rail. See, restoring workers' rights and building workers' skills, creating the infrastructure of the 21st century, thinking strategically when it comes to trade policy. These are the strategies for making the American dream as real for our children as it was for my parents. But even that will not be enough. You see, we simply must change our culture. We as a nation must be true to our better selves. Employers must not make a buck on the backs of workers who live in fear of deportation. And workers must stand together and not apart in the workplace for good jobs and for safe jobs and for health care for all and retirement security that we can all count on. So when we talk about making the American dream real, the labor movement stands for making it real for all of us, each and every one of us who do the work of our country. All of us, no matter what we look like, no matter how we worship, no matter who we choose to love, no matter where we come from. Surely, there's something that we can find common ground in there. Thank you.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to a Friday forum featuring Richard L. Trumka, president of the AFL-CIO. We will return to our speaker momentarily for our traditional City Club questions. We encourage you to formulate your questions now and remind you to keep them brief and to the point. We welcome you to this City Club forum. We want to remind you that members and guests alike are welcome to attend our forums here in downtown Cleveland at 850 Euclid Avenue. We hope everyone listening will join the club and become active in our ongoing civic dialogue. We welcome guests today at tables hosted by Baker Hostetler, Medical Mutual of Ohio, North Coast Area Labor Federation, and the North Shore AFL-CIO. Thank you for joining us today. Now, we would like to return to our speaker for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphones today are City Club Database Manager Lucille Barbati and PR and Program Manager Carrie Miller. So let's have our first question, please. Mr. Trumka.
Thank you.
Your presentation indicated many changes that are going to be needed. Many changes are going to require campaign reform. What do you suggest?
You talking about election campaign reform? Couldn't be more in favor of it. If you look at right now, we just had a crisis, an economic crisis that was fomented by Wall Street going wild. The financial economy got out of control, caused a crisis that caused us to lose 11 million jobs in this country. And when we try to reform them, what you see right now on Washington, on the Hill, Capitol Hill, as you and I sit here and talk, there are 4 lobbyists for every member of the House and every member of the Senate on Capitol Hill right now, trying to prevent a conference from actually getting a law that will work for us. Unfortunately, I believe with this Supreme Court, it may take as much as a constitutional amendment saying that money does not equal free speech. Because as it turns out right now, the Supreme Court said any regulation on money, they say, is infringement on free speech. When if you take that one step further, it means the more money you have, the more free speech you have, which I don't think was the intention of our founding fathers. So it may take a constitutional amendment, but we are working short of that to try to curb the last decision that was made so that unlimited amounts of corporate and union money, quite frankly, can't flow freely into the election process, and we can have elections that are actually based on issues, not on who can spend the most. I think there's no more important issue right now than doing campaign reform that gets us back to where the people's voice is heard more than the lobbyists' voices are heard.
What can unions do to motivate the children of your members to perform well in school and desire either a college education or a proud, skilled vocation?
Well, I think we do that several ways. You can talk about it, and I remember when I was growing up, the thing that my parents said to me every single day, they said, the coal companies can take anything away from you, but if you get an education, they can't take that away from you. So part of it's up to us. We have to continue to talk to them every single day. We also have to do it by example. And what we're doing in the labor movement to try to increase the importance of education and training is the following. One, we have apprenticeship programs that our members go through that actually builds them, gives them the skills to be a career path forward. We're creating now pre-apprenticeship programs because there's many people in the community that can't pass the test into an apprenticeship program because their math skills or English skills aren't up to par, so the pre-apprenticeship program gets them there. It's also bringing that program to the community itself. We're also doing we have a labor college. I don't know if you know about this. We have an accredited labor college that we have just outside of Washington, D.C., where you can get a Bachelor of Science degree or a master's degree. And we formed a partnership with Princeton Review to take those courses online. It'll be the largest online college in the next 5 years, and we'll be able to convert every single union hall into a classroom so that people can start getting college credit. By the way, we've also upgraded the level of our apprenticeship programs so that when one of our apprentices comes out of those programs right now, they get an associate degree and they're about 2/3 of the way to a Bachelor of Science degree. It's also talking about education policy. Our affiliate, the AFT, increasingly talks every single day about how to make education better and more affordable and more effective to not only our members but to every child out there, because it is the future of America and the future of our country. But think about this, because I want to tie it back into economics. Whenever we have a mortgage crisis and it drives property values down, that has an effect on your school district because the tax base goes away. Whenever a factory closes and moves to China, and the people that moved it to China got rewarded for moving it to China, that takes away from your tax base. People don't pay taxes, and neither does that company. So the other thing that we're trying to do right now is make sure that we have fair revenues in this country so that our educational system can be adequate and growing. And one of the things that's up right now is a bill that would send money to state and local governments to prevent the layoff of hundreds of thousands of teachers. Up to 900,000 teachers, firefighters, and police officers could get laid off because of what's happening in the state budgets. That will destroy the future of education for all Americans, not just for union members. So we're fighting that on a daily basis.
Mr. Trumka, I was very impressed that you took such a strong stand on immigration and immigration reform, and I would support that wholeheartedly. My question is, what's the difference in political strategy for the AFL-CIO and the labor movement? Is this now your top priority? A year and a half ago, beginning of the new administration, card check was very high on the priority list, I know. Has this moved ahead of it? Is this something? And secondly, it seems to me it won't happen with a coalition of just union and faith-based organizations. And there's some common interest with business here in some significant areas. Has that been discussed, and is that something that is moving forward from your point of view?
I could talk all afternoon on those questions. I appreciate them very much. I'll try to put them in a context. none of these issues can actually be taken separately. You have to look at them as a whole. And let me start off by giving you an economic framework that'll explain to you what I mean. From 1946 to 1973 in this country, productivity doubled, and so did wages. It was the greatest distribution of wealth of any country, any time in the world. And the interesting thing about that was the people in the bottom two quartiles, their wages were increasing faster than the people at the top, so the wage gap was closing. Then in the mid-70s, things started to change, and from 73 forward, productivity has continued up, but wages for workers has stagnated and actually gone down the last several years. So we make less now than we did before, and we've been stagnated since the 70s. So to cope with that, workers had to go through a bunch of strategies. First, they tried working a lot of overtime. And when they couldn't keep up that way, they sent a second person from the family out into the workforce, or a third person to keep family income up. When that didn't keep pace, we took on a second and sometimes even a third job, trying to keep our ability to consume up. Now remember this, that our economy is 72% driven by consumer spending. 72%. If consumers can't spend, the economy can't grow. And you can't spend if your wages are flat. Now, by the way, from 46 to 73, collective bargaining was about at 37.5% of the workforce. That's the density. So wages that were shared equally were driving America, and we were all prospering. Since that time, of course, the share of people that have collective bargaining has dropped precipitously to about 12%. That's come about by a number of different policies. It's come about because of tax policies that reward people for going offshore. It's come about because of trade policies that have failed, and even their authors now admit that they failed. It's come about because of a number of different economic policies, slow growth policies that were initiated. So when you say, what's our top priority? Our top priority is jobs. Jobs and more jobs to fill the 11 million job holes that we've had since this recession started. But you can't get there unless you address several different problems. Giving people the right to collective bargaining will help because it will give us a fairer share of what we produce, and we will relink productivity with wage gains again like they were when the middle class was built in this country. That's why collective bargaining is so important. It's to give people more of a chance to get some of the wealth that they gain so that the 72% that drives the economy, more people have money to spend. Now, immigrants fit into that, quite frankly, as well. So it's a high priority for us. There is no single priority other than creating jobs for Americans. Do we have a common interest with employers? We have absolutely a common interest with employers who are interested about having a real reform of the immigration system. Those employers that seek to take advantage of it, that I talked to you about, like the current system, where it's open yet it's closed, probably they won't join with us. But I think a vast group of Americans are saying, the system's broken, let's fix it, let's get everybody back to work, and let's create an economy that really does work for everybody. Listen, this is a question I like to ask anybody. You ever stop to wonder why the richest nation on the face of the earth, and we are the richest nation on the face of the earth, seems to be going backwards, where we can't fund education, where we can't fund pensions, where we can't come up with a way to give health care to everybody, when everybody else, every other industrialized country in the world has found a way to do it with less resources, with less money? You ever wonder about that? Well, I do. And it's been those policies that have prevented us from doing that. And immigration is one of those policies that allows people to take advantage and create a permanent underclass and drive down wages for everybody.
Thank you, sir. There are times, today is one, in which I think if the management of many American corporations were as sharp as that of American labor, we wouldn't be in some of the situations we are today. The question I have for you, one hears quite often that one of our most urgent problems is a short-term debt crisis. How would you respond to that? Thank you.
Yes. Well, here, let me put that in a frame as well, why that's important and how it plays out. We went into a recession a few years ago. That recession cost us 11 million jobs. We have 15 million people that are unemployed as we speak. We have 25 million that were considered underemployed. That's either unemployed or working part-time when they want to work full-time. We have 6.5 million people who have been laid off longer than 6 months. That's the greatest number of long-term employment this country's seen, even greater number than we had in the Great Depression. Not a greater percentage, but a greater number. So what we've said is you have to stimulate the economy. Government must stimulate the economy to get the economy growing. Remember, there are 4 things that drive the economy. Consumer spending is at 72%. The second thing is business investment. Business is not investing right now because they're afraid to. The third is net exports. We don't have net exports. We have net imports by a large number. And the fourth is government spending. So government spending is necessary to spur the economy so that job growth can become ingrained and start to take root from the public and the private sector. So we just started to do that. We had a program last year, the president pushed for an economic stimulus program that actually saved a number of jobs, and saving jobs is as important as creating jobs, quite frankly. So that is just starting to take root right now. The recovery is fragile. It hasn't produced any kind of job numbers that we'd like to see. Last month there were 490,000 jobs that were created. 450,000 were temporary jobs because of the consensus. Only 41,000 came from the public or the private sector. And so what you're dealing with is a very fragile recovery. So if you pull back on the stimulus, you end up pushing us back into a recession. Now, we have a 5-point program to bring us out of it. Point one is investing in infrastructure. We have a $2.2 trillion deficit, infrastructure deficit in this country. Roads, bridges, schools are all being run down because we haven't invested in them. Investing in them over the long term will create jobs and give us a world-class economy. Second part is extending unemployment benefits and health care benefits to the laid off. Remember I said we have 6.5 million people that are long-term laid off. If those benefits expire and 6.5 million people stop consuming, the economy will take a real broadside and it'll tip us back in the wrong direction. The third thing that we advocate is aid to state and local governments because, as I said, the 4 drivers, federal spending is up here right now to stimulate, but state spending is actually dropping. And the net effect is almost zeroed out right now. So that's not helping us the way it should. We need to get money to those states and local governments so that teachers, firefighters, and police officers don't get laid off, but just as importantly, so that those layoffs don't tip us back in to recession where we came from. The fourth thing is we'd like to see government create jobs directly. Let's assume you have a center city school that the students are having a tough time for whatever reason. The government could create tutors that would create a job that would help the economy. It would also solve a problem of helping us in those school districts. I know they're talking about having classrooms of 45. I mean, for God's sake, a classroom of 45 is not inducive to a good education.